Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Mojo AI podcast. Today we're going to do things a little bit differently. Usually we have a safety pro with us where we talk about a specific aspect of running a good safety program, but we do get a lot of questions about our product, Safety Mojo. It is using AI technology to streamline safety operations, help with data collection, but you hear about AI everywhere, all the amazing things it can do, all the terrible things that it's going to do for humanity. The truth about it is somewhere in the middle. And so to help answer the questions that we hear around that today, we've got our Chief Operating Officer, Manoj Perumal. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me here.
Sure. So to start, can you tell us a little bit about your background, maybe your education, some of your work history, and what is your experience working with AI?
Sure. After I finished my engineering in electronics and computer science, I started my career as a software developer. Worked for a bunch of top tier banks, primarily in the Asia Pacific region. So my job was just running through data and finding insights out of those data. It used to be 1 week to create a report and just dig into data to now, today I can do the same thing within a couple of minutes now. So that's how much technology has improved. But after working for these banks for a few years, I did my master's in business administration. Right after my business school, I just shifted from a software engineering role to how can we apply technology for businesses and making businesses run in a very streamlined way. So that has been my passion. Got into starting companies. So that's how ended up, along with Corey Linton,
Our CEO.
our CEO, creating Mojo AI. And even within Mojo, we have shifted back and forth between a couple of industries and finally got into the space where we are today. Safety, it has been an eye-opening last 5-6 years for us, for me, for sure, and how we can apply technology to improve safety for the frontline people.
Okay. So before we get into showing the app itself and what's going on from the user perspective and behind the scenes, I want to talk a little bit about some of the AI related terms that you hear out there. To start, like machine learning. Can you explain what that is in simple terms for the average person who hasn't spent their career as a developer?
Sure, Jeff. Let me take a step back, a little bit of context around that, right? Like I said, when I started my career, it used to be weeks of time spent on creating these reports to just look at data in a meaningful way, right? It slowly evolved into a place where how can we train or how can we program that can learn on its own and change the trajectory based on what it sees. So that's, I would call that as machine learning, a software program that looks at data, patterns, and then finds an optimized way, adjusts itself, and moves forward. That's machine learning, and I would say that's there for a long time. People have been trying to figure this out for a very long time. I would say, at least from my understanding, at least 30-40 years now.
Okay. And has it been perfected?
I would say large language models. Generative AI has been, in my view, looking at software data for a long time, at least for the last 15 years or so. In my view, large language models, specifically generative AI, has been a significant improvement in that area.
Okay. And that brings up two other terms that I wanted to ask you about. What is a large language model?
A large language model is basically an artificial intelligence model, right, that has been designed to understand, generate, basically look at text like how, as a human being, we look at it, right? So this is important because, again, the human-like, that's an important piece because that opens up a lot of opportunity, right? So that is a significant improvement. I would say the last 4 years, that's a phenomenal improvement. To look something like how a human being will look at that.
Yeah, you mentioned looking at text. Now, does that mean written text, typed text? Can it be spoken text? And can it also be images?
Absolutely. Specifically in the last 6 months, or if you go a little bit back, let's say in the last year or so, there are significant improvements on the image side as well. Basically, looking at a static image and understanding what's going on in that image. And I think it is getting into, there are definitely some interesting models that are improving significantly in that area. But images, it's phenomenal what the capabilities are available today.
Okay. The other term you mentioned that I wanted to bring up is generative AI. What does that mean?
Again, it's an artificial intelligence model where it has been trained on a ton of data, unimaginable amount of data. These data comes from web to documents and articles and all kind of text that's available. There are some controversies around that as well, what kind of data has been used on these training and all. But again, these models are trained on a significant amount of data pool that combined with thinking and understanding human like gives them the power to go generate images and text in a way that was impossible in the past. That's again generative AI that generates content by having this context based on a significant amount of data.
Okay, and I think that term is something that people might be more familiar with when you look at things like Chat GPT or Midjourney, where you input some prompts via typing and it tries to interpret what you're asking or what you're telling it, and then it generates a response within certain confines based on the model.
Exactly.
Is that accurate?
You're right. Yep. Spot on.
Great. One final term I wanted to bring up, natural language processing. Now, is that just part of the large language model? Does that just describe how a model is interpreting the input?
So yeah, natural language processing or NLP has been there for quite some time now. There are a ton of companies have their own models, and those are in existence for a long time. Where basically it's understanding like what a human is talking and extracting all the information out of it. And probably you might have seen in some of the tools where they are used to create transcript out of conversation, transcript out of sales calls or something like that. So natural language processing has been in existence for a long time, but I think generative AI and large language model, in my view, are much powerful and better and getting more and more powerful than the regular NLP that we have been using in the past.
Yeah, and things have been getting more efficient as well. Is that
Absolutely.
accurate? It probably took giant supercomputers and server clusters to process this, but now when you see the commercials for iPhone 16, they're showing you, hey, we can summarize your email conversations in an instant, or we can find these things on your calendar, and that's all just running right on the phone.
Totally. So that is a combination of multiple things coming together, right? We often have heard about this term where some of the machineries or some of the computers used in some of the most powerful jets like 15 years back, insignificant compared to an iPhone that you use today, right? Technology, not only these AI models has improved, but also the devices that we use, the processing power of these devices, everything has improved. That all coming together now are providing this opportunity to experience these unimaginable things, or sometimes we call it as it's like a magic, right?
Yeah, it is pretty cool the things that are possible now with your phone. So next, I want to get into more specifically how Safety Mojo is using AI for our purposes. To set the stage there, most of our customers are in the construction industry and oil and gas industry.
Yep.
So before we get into the app itself, can you talk a little bit about what safety programs in those industries look like now? And then I think that will help explain like why we're doing what we do, and it will help clarify the benefits of AI in these industries?
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question, Jeff. And to some extent, I look at that question like, why do we exist as a company? Like what we do and why we do what we do. Every single company that we have met in this couple of industries, like construction, oil and gas, people are very passionate about the frontline employees because that's where the risk is. They are the one who are building, and there is a lot of risk, right? And when you talk to these companies, they're very passionate about their people. Like we all want our colleagues, our friends to go home safely, right? But if you look at what's humanly possible in these industries, right? Like for example, if you want your people to be safe 100%, and if you want to provide them all the tools and techniques to make them completely safe, you cannot let them work. They want to work, right? So it's a balance of what can we provide so that we are not interrupting in their work, but also we want to make sure they're 100% safe, right? So today, if we look at whether it is construction or oil and gas, there is a lot of processes that happens on the field, and there are a lot of challenges from using mobile apps or using other tools on the field. So what happens here is, for the companies, they are not able to understand what actually goes on the field on a daily basis. Without knowing all of those, it is impossible to make sure like their people are covered. So that's where, even though we all want our people to be safe, we don't have everything available in our hands to make it happen. Right? That's the current situation.
Yeah, and you mentioned a lot of processes happening on the front line. And is it accurate to say that for a lot of organizations, a lot of those processes are happening on paper, like through paper-based forms? For example, a subcontractor comes on a site to do some excavation. They need to fill out a permit to let the superintendent, the foreman know what's going on. They have to wait for approval. If somebody is doing a job site audit, observing hazards and working conditions on the site, they're recording things on paper. If someone gets injured, if an incident happens, the report is happening on paper. And the first level of improving that we've seen as a big change in the industry over the last several years is simply digitizing that. Is that accurate? That has been one of the biggest changes in frontline safety recently.
Yeah, I agree, Jeff. But digitization has been the first step, and there are a lot of companies that have done that well. And from my view, there are a lot of companies even today hasn't even got into that step yet. And what I think one of the primary reason for that is basically I don't think companies or technology companies in this space has put in enough thoughts and work around the user experience. We have to keep in mind the frontline people, their primary work is done with their hands, right? So I don't think the technology companies in this space has provided or that has spent enough time and effort on that area, right? So for example, Instagram or TikTok knows how to get you in every day. Do you want to make yourself look really good? Touch a button, it will happen. But I don't think in the construction or oil and gas space, specifically for the frontline people, technology companies have put in that much effort to really make it as simple as possible for the frontline to work, right, with their tools if we make these processes the easiest, I'm sure every single company in the country will adapt.
Yeah.
And they'll quickly change.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's one thing that I hear talked about in the office here is how do we make the safest way to do something, also the most efficient way to do something. Because one of the pushbacks that we hear from safety pros all the time is doing these forms or following safety procedures to the letter, it reduces our productivity. It slows down work, it adds unnecessary steps. We don't want to do it. I'm sure that's the balance that a lot of companies in this space are trying to work with.
So that is definitely a big challenge for everybody in the space. Again, going back to that point, at a very high level, if you look at what a foreman or a superintendent who's managing a crew or multiple crews on the field, what are they doing from the processes perspective to keep the frontline people safe, right? At a very high level, if you look at it, you might think there are one or two things that they are doing. But if you just go a level deep and if you try to understand what all they have to do, it is pretty involved. Like keeping a crew safe in a very dynamic environment is not easy. So there is a lot of things involved in that. Going back to my previous comment, if we can make whatever tools and techniques and then processes that we want our frontline crews and frontline leadership to follow as simple as possible, I'm sure people will easily adapt and it will make work environments very safe for our frontline people.
I agree. All right, and now I'd like to get into a little bit of a demonstration that I'm hoping will help people understand these principles better. We've talked about the technologies behind AI. We've talked a little bit about how things operate on a construction site, which is often just some form of controlled chaos. And how do you keep people safe in a very simple way that's not intrusive? So the first thing I'd like to show everybody is a feature in our app called Ask Mojo. Like really quickly, can you just give an overview of what that feature is, what it does, and then we'll do a quick demo.
Sure, Jeff. So one thing, if you go to any construction site or if you're in the oil field, you'll notice people carrying a ton of paper forms or a safety manual or a
SDS information.
Exactly.
OSHA information.
So there is a lot of information that's printed out every single day based on the project they work on, based on the city, county, state they work on. So the problem is most of the times it is impossible to go find an answer if you have a question. And typically when somebody on the front line has a question, it's very important, right? So typical process is they go find where their safety manager is, where their operations manager is, ask the question, they go check, or they have a PDF where they go do a keyword search to find answer for that question, right? So to cater to that group, which is, again, when they have a question, it is very important, right? We thought about this a lot. How can we make the right information available to these people at the right time when they want, right? So that's where Ask Mojo comes in. Ask Mojo is basically what we have done with that is any documentation that you want your frontline people or anybody for that matter in your organization to have access to, you can put that document into Mojo. We take it, we use some of AI models to parse through this and store it in a way where it is easily accessible when there is a question, whether you have a 100-page document or 5,000-page document. If you have a question, you'll get an answer in a second. So that's Ask Mojo. So
can you show us quickly how that works?
sure. What are the 5 key elements of a lockout tagout process? So here, I'm just think that I'm in a specific site. I'm new to this site. Let's say the owner of that project has a specific process, and the company I work for has a specific process. But my superintendent has told me that, Manoj, you got to use whatever process the owner says, right? I'm asking that question in a matter of couple of seconds. I got the answer from the document or the safety document of the owner, right? I can simply read. If you look at it, the way we have designed this is we don't want to share a bunch of paragraphs of information to the frontline people. We want to give them a precise answer when they're asking a question, right? If somebody want to know more about the answer, they can still go at the bottom. You'll notice it shows from what specific document that information was pulled from. They can also simply click the link here, go to the page from where the information was pulled, and if they want to know more context around that specific process, they can read through and all the stuff. But this is not a keyword search where you have 15 different pages where that keyword is available. This is a specific answer to a specific question. One thing that comes often is, are you guys pulling this data from internet?
Right.
We want to be very specific about where the answer comes from. And that's why I mentioned, if in a project you want your people to follow only the guidelines that comes from the owner, you can specifically mention the answer should come from this specific document, right? Mojo app, based on my user profile, it looks for what all documents I have access to, and it pulls answers just from that answer documents. If you're not able to find an answer, if the answer is not in the document, we'll simply respond back saying that, hey, we are not able to find the answer, go talk to your safety manager or superintendent. We don't want to make up answer.
And that's important. And I know a lot of people worry about that when they hear about AI hallucinations, where they're
Absolutely.
giving you made up information or false information. That's not a risk here at all.
Totally. Yep.
Okay. And the benefit for frontline workers is that speed of access to accurate information.
Totally. There are multiple scenarios where OSHA shows up and they ask your people, hey, tell me how you do this. Rather than them scrambling around to find what documents I should be looking for, where I can find this, it's basically you have all the documents right at your fingertips.
So if an inspector shows up, say, hey, I need your STS information for this, boom, just right there.
Exactly.
You don't have to, let me go ask somebody and hope that they know where it is.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And then from the leadership perspective, say the owner of a project or the CEO of a contractor or the operations director, like what is the benefit for them in a solution like this?
This is if you think about the risk of frontline not having right information and they're involved in high risk activities, right? It's a significant risk for the companies, right? So from an executive's perspective, I'm making sure my people are aware of what they are supposed to do and how they are supposed to do certain things on the field. So that gives me one peace of mind from, I know that my people have all the information that they need. Also, I know that the probability of having an incident on the field is significantly less. Mm-hmm. So those are a few things that I can think from a CEO of a company or from an owner's perspective. And also the significant impact on the cost of handling an incident, right? So all of that is part of it as well.
Yeah, and might sound small, but you can eliminate the need for so many paper manuals and documents that either live in the truck or back in the trailer collecting dust. This makes it so much more easily accessible and useful.
We have come across companies that spend more than $100,000 on just printing papers and safety manuals and SDS and stuff. Again, you can print all of them. Consuming the information that you need when you need it is impossible with those documents, right?
Yeah.
So that's another massive benefit there.
Yeah, and one thing that we didn't mention when we started this is you can ask your question in multiple languages. It's not just English.
Yeah, so this is the benefit of generative AI comes into play, where today there are models that are capable of understanding, responding back in 190 languages. If you look at our country here, most of our frontline employees are from different backgrounds. They speak different languages, right? So, how easy to make sure people have, if you have somebody whose primary language is not English, how easy it is through Ask Mojo or through our document library to open up all the information that they need in their primary language, right? That's another benefit of it as well.
And it's not just the input, correct? You can ask it to translate. Say you're a foreman, you only speak English, and you want to convey this information to a Spanish-speaking worker. You can ask the question in English, and at the end say, "Give me the answer in Spanish." It will display the answer in Spanish, and then you can just share it right there.
Exactly, Jeff. That's a great use case because, like I said, there are a lot of frontline people whose primary language is not English, and foremen who are superintendents who are handling these kind of crews, right? Having this multilingual capability comes handy for sure.
The next thing I want to talk about is something that we call conversational AI. And that addresses something I talked about a little bit earlier, where a lot of the safety processes on a construction site or an oil production site are based on paper forms for everything. And that introduces something called pencil whipping, where people don't want to stop and take the time to fill out a form accurately, correctly, with all the detail that leadership wants, that the safety pros want. So they just whip through it just to get it done because they see it as a distraction. And we're using something called conversational AI to eliminate that. So can you talk a little bit about what that is and then show how we're doing that?
Sure, Jeff. I'm going to go back to a couple of things that we talked earlier. One is, like I said, there are a lot of processes going on in the field. Those are to make sure, one, to keep people safe, also to capture as much information possible from the front line and then send it back to office, right? So that's one. I don't think pencil whipping is not done in purpose. In my view, there is a lot. How much you can write, right? So, and sometimes it's very monotonous, right? People get bored with that, so they just do whatever they have to, and then they want to move on to the next work, get into the job that they have to do, right? So that's from the frontline's perspective. Also, remember we talked about generative AI, large language model. I mentioned about human-like, right? So the AI models has improved to a place where they have started thinking like, writing like humans, right? So we brought this problem and the solution together. We have been thinking about improving user experience for our frontline people for a long time, right? And as AI has improved and improved, one of the clear use cases, how can we reduce the amount of work the frontline has to do either on paper or on a computer or on a mobile app to as minimum as possible. So that's where conversational AI comes into play.
Yeah, that's a good point, because just digitizing your paper forms doesn't necessarily reduce the amount of work required, especially if you're on a phone where you're typing. It could be even slower in some cases.
It is actually more work because I'm so used to writing it on paper. Now you're asking me to put everything on a computer. I'm not good at it. I'm good at building stuff, not this one, right? So that's where the way we approached was, like I said, the problem that we were trying to solve was how can we make this as simple as possible, right? So conversational AI comes into play where people on the front line can simply talk about what they have to do. So for example, common things that we do on these high risk space is basically job hazard analysis or job safety analysis. Just simply talk about what all tasks that we are going to do, what all hazards that's around us, how are we going to control. It is one of the most important safety ritual because that helps frontline people to actually think about, you know what, today this is my work environment and I gotta make sure I'm safe, right? But the most effective way is for people or the crew members to talk between themselves. Now, if we are forcing them to write on paper or forcing them to type on an app, it's tough. So, our conversational AI can just listen to what they are talking about. They don't have to do anything. They just continue their conversation, talk about all of these things. We take everything through our AI, parse through it, and complete the whole form submission for them. For the frontline people, it is like an assistant just standing right next to them, capturing everything that they talk. And for the people in the office, the executives and the frontline leadership, they get all the insights that they want to get from the frontline. So that's what conversational AI does. And we apply conversational AI to any processes, any documentation work that you have to do in the frontline, right?
Yeah.
So here is an observation. If you look at this one, if you look at the number of information that you have to collect, part of that is what division I'm part of, what project I'm part of, building area. There is a lot of stuff, right? This is what frustrates frontline people. So rather than you go through everything, put it in an app or writing all of these down on a paper, just simply go, click this and talk. I'm part of leased division. I'm in project CHY. Right now, I'm standing in building number 4, area A, level 2, data hall. I see an employee from AC mechanics cutting with a battery operated saw. He's using proper saw horse and a clamp with a spotter for kickbacks. If you think about it, the way I talk was actually how I think. I see something, and as a human, I think certain way, and I'm just expressing how I'm thinking. So behind the scene, what happens is, if you look at the app now, it processed all the information. This is not talk to text. This is an intelligent AI behind the scene, taking all what you said, parsing through and completing the form for you. So if you look at it, division, leased, project CHY, building, area, level, room, it automatically assign a category. And as I showed, if you look at here, there are a ton of categories. Rather than you trying to figure out, should I put it under this category or that category, the AI assigns category. And then type of observation, it is an act. And then observation rating, it's a positive reinforcement. So it completes 99% of the work that you have to do. All you have to do is just review once. If you want to go edit, you can change. And then just click submit and move on to the next work. So that's how simple it is. So this is taking that friction of, I have to go write all of these stuff on paper. So I'm going to make something up and then I'm just going to move on. Or I have to go type all of these things on the app. It takes all of those stuff out and you just talk. As an assistant, it listens to you and it does the work for you. This is just supporting you, right? It's an intelligent assistant supporting you.
Yeah, and like you said, you can speak naturally. You don't have to necessarily speak everything in the exact order that you did.
Exactly.
And the Ask Mojo example that we showed, you can put this in English or Spanish, correct? Or any of the other
Any of the other
190 languages that we support.
Exactly.
And on the back end, like this is available in real time, right? The information that you put in on the form.
Totally. So what this enables people, frontline leadership or executives, people who are behind the scene, and then helping frontline people to get the work done. For them, it is equipping them with insights which was impossible in the past, right? If this was done on a paper, for that paper to reach office, it might take a couple of days, right? Similar example is a JHA or a PTP meeting that happens on a regular basis on every single work site, mostly on a paper or whiteboard. What happens is after they're done with the conversation, they either erase the whiteboard, move on to their job, or they throw the paper on a box and then they move on. Whereas here, we are capturing all of those information real time. We are sharing that information, our insights, with the leadership so that they know where the risks are and how they can mitigate those risks.
Mm-hmm. And these are just a couple of form examples we showed that this works with almost any form, right? Think about how fast like vehicle inspections would be if you're just equipment inspections, if you're not writing as you go, if you're just speaking as you go. Superintendent logs at the end of the day. Incident reports where you may not have time to go find the right form. Now you can just start talking to get the process going.
Also, to that example of incident report, rather than somebody typing, you are hearing all they are saying naturally. So you are capturing everything out of that. So that's the biggest benefit of this, Jeff. To your point, the conversational AI as a concept can be applied to any frontline data collection or any process. For that matter, we have conversationalized a ton of different processes for different companies, from ticketing process from the field to incident reports to audits, vehicle inspection, anywhere you want to reduce amount of time your frontline people are spending on writing or typing stuff, you can deploy our conversational AI.
Yeah, this is really cool stuff, and it's benefiting a lot of organizations. One final thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit before we end. At the beginning, we talked about some AI terms that were used, but another question that comes up a lot, and that people may be thinking now that they've seen how it works, is what are we doing with customer data that might be in the system, or sensitive information? If you are doing an incident report, that's information that you don't want getting out. Can you talk a little bit about encryption around our data and how we're using it, whether or not we're using it to train or making it available for other AI models? Like, I know a lot of people have that concern around their private data.
That's a very valid concern, right? One thing that we want to be very careful about is the data that we are interested with is very important data. The information about incidents, the safety gaps, right? These are all very important for these companies. So we take it like very seriously. So what we do is a couple of things. One, our application itself is, to your point, of encrypted on the fly when it is stored, so it's completely safe there. With respect to AI, pretty much everybody has this concern of, is our data being used to train models or to support other companies in their use cases or whatnot, right? So what we do is every company's data has been locked, for a lack of better term, in a box for that company. Not even a single piece of data goes outside that box, right? And we use models that are like enterprise grade, completely secure. Those models do not use data from us to train for anything else. We are very particular about it, right? But also we use some techniques internally to refine these models to our own use cases and secure it in a way where the data from any one company is not spilled over or used in another company's instance.
Thank you so much, Manoj, for visiting with me today to talk about this. This is complicated stuff, but what I like about Mojo AI and Safety Mojo is like we're using AI in a very practical way that is actually useful in making a difference for a lot of companies.
So that's a great point, Jeff. The way we approach AI is we don't want to just take AI, put it in the product just because it's cool, right? the way we approach is we start from our business problems, or we start from customers' problems, and we look at how can we solve that problem in a much better way, right? If AI is one of the solution, we use it. If it is not, we don't. So that's how we have always looked at any of the concern that comes from our customers. But in the last few years, some of these advancements has definitely provided us opportunity to bring technological advancement and our customers' concern areas close and close. So we were fortunate enough to use these technologies to solve these problems in a much better way.
Yeah, that's a good point. If people want to get in touch with you to maybe talk more about AI or what we're doing here, where can they do that?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, Manoj Perumal. You can find me on LinkedIn, message me, or if you wanna chat, I'm always open.
Okay, we'll have a link available. I want to thank everybody again for joining us. If you'd like to get in touch with us to talk a little bit more about how our solution might benefit your operations, our website is getmojo.ai. And as a company, you can also find us and follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. Thank you. Be safe out there.
Thank you all.